Iron Fist Danny Rand has been dead for like what, a little bit over a year now. And if you've been a fan or following comics for more than 2 minutes, you'd know that death doesn't really stay permanent in the Marvel Universe, as now he is back, now as the Undead Iron Fist or Ghost Fist. Though before we can talk about him coming back to life, his new powers, and even the people who he fights against and the other heroes, it's only right to talk about how he died in the first place. Because back in the Iron Fist 50th anniversary series, we've seen essentially Danny Rand be jumped because he is no longer the Iron Fist. He has retired, and now Lin Lie has taken his powers and the chi of the actual Iron Fist. Now that isn't to say that Danny is powerless, but he is vulnerable and not as powerful as he was before, and that's exactly what the villain here, Razor Fist, being possessed by a almost demonic presence named Chi Lin, who wanted revenge and to take the Iron Fist's life, and eventually he was successful, killing Danny Rand, as he's no longer the Iron Fist, but for now, at the very least, he is something more. He's now the Ghost Fist. As when we come back into the present, we see Luke Cage, who was probably Danny's best friend, his almost brother, if you will, mourning his death and at his gravesite, leaving flowers and whatever have you, only to find out the entire grave has been dug up and upturned, and the body is gone. Danny Rand is gone. As the comic even goes on to say, "You have come a long way, hero. You were born into riches, the heir of a business empire, later trained to become the ultimate weapon in a faraway mystical land of Kunlun. You became immortal by slaying a mystical dragon. Then you came down to earth as a defender for the oppressed, a hero for hire. But with his death, all of that has been taken away from you. Now you must do what you must. Have your vengeance and fulfill your purpose by bringing me their souls." Which is essentially what Danny's purpose is here back into the land of the living. He needs to get his vengeance against a very powerful and old threat. But back over, we've seen where he was before all of this, in the underworld, his soul being kept there after, well, dying. The only thing keeping him going is his undying spirit. As well, even in death, he is not free from dragons and other danger in that sense. But this story so far takes a very non-linear approach, telling us bits and pieces without fully revealing everything all at once, as once we move back over into the present, we see him fighting essentially what is normal people possessed by other powers. The same powers or entity that killed him in the first place, except now a bunch of them in possessing normal people. Their goal, of course, is to kill Iron Fist again, or Ghost Fist as his new moniker is, and send him back to the underworld. Yeah, that's the thing. Danny Rand here, he's no longer powered by the dragon or the chi. Instead, he has an entirely new entity backing him and new power set, as whatever voice in his head that is empowering him goes on to say, "You want to end every single one of them, and I've granted you the power to do that. Expel them, the demonic forces, from their human host. Do what you must to fulfill your revenge, and pay no mind to what the mortals think. They don't know of your silent mission. Only you can see them for what they truly are, the Chi Lin, the twisted and monstrous looking creatures. But to everybody else in the outside world, normal mortals can't see them, and it just looks like Danny is fighting civilians and old people and just everyday people. So, he can't just go full force and killing people left and right. Instead, he is using his new granted abilities, which he only has a limited supply of them. He's using them to expel the other forces from the normal humans. The only thing is, there's an entire army of them, which is not good because, again, to everybody else, it looks like he's just beating up a bunch of normal people. And this doesn't go unnoticed by the other heroes of New York, as just then Spider-Man swings on by, specifically MilesMorales, questioning what is happening and who's this guy, this Iron Fist, beating up everybody, and goes to investigate further, eventually tracking him down, finding him inside of the sewers. And for whatever reason, after using his Venom Blast, he is able to actually see these monstrous creatures and demonic forces. And this move here isn't even really a good thing for Miles, because as we go to find out, they also want to attack and possess him as well, of course, not just getting normal humans, but a superhuman in Spider-Man's case. So it just puts more work on Iron Fist, having to now defeat them and defend Miles from getting taken over as well. Miles, on the other hand, just thinking this is some sort of illusion and not really knowing who Iron Fist is and his entire deal. So he goes to attack Danny Rand, ignoring the illusions that he thinks what's going on, forcing Danny Rand here, this Ghost Fist, to use his new abilities and something called the Rays of Ra, which just sends a powerful shockwave all throughout. But this does have its consequences, because as it goes on to say, he has to use his new powers wisely, because they're not infinite. If he uses too much too quickly, he can burn through it all and leaving his mission incomplete and sending him back into the underworld. He only has a limited supply of the energy. Of course, now Spider-Man just realizing, oh shoot, wait, this is real. Danny Rand, on the other hand, just goes on to tell Miles, as a friend of Misty's, as in Misty Knight, trust me when I say this, stay out of my way, which puts Miles at bay, telling him to back off, that this is serious. As Danny Rand then goes off, and as he continues, a couple things are made abundantly clear. One, One, that whoever is his goal, they have almost an infinite supply of these demonic entities to send after him as he's just fighting left and right. And secondly, the person behind everything is someone very known to the Iron Fist Order, as when we move over into the flashback once more, back when he was in the underworld before he got revived, we see that he isn't the only previous Iron Fist there in the underworld. No, he also meets up with Orson Randall, the previous Iron Fist before Danny Rand, which just throws another confusing bit into this entire situation, because as he even goes on to tell Danny, are you ready for your first lesson? You know the Book of the Iron Fist, right? The entire thing they swear upon and follow to a T. Well, everything we learned was a lie, simply insinuating that there's corruption behind the entire Iron Fist Order. Not only that, but while he was here in the underworld, Orson even saw Danny's death, and while he wanted to, step in and try to help and save him from being just murdered, he couldn't, and even tried bargaining to get back to the land of the living, but his past sins didn't allow him to interfere. Though someone like Danny might have better luck, and obviously he will as we see him back on the surface world now. But Orson also makes something else very clear as he goes on to say, there is corruption behind the entire Iron Fist Order, and you're going to help tear it all down. Of course, Danny Rand is skeptical. How could everything they have ever been trained and taught be wrong, be a lie, be corrupted? And as with most things or organizations with corruption, it usually starts from the top down. Orson goes on to say, us Iron Fist are lined up to die for a reason. You've even experienced it yourself. So now you'll need to take down the one who wrote the entire book in the first place, meaning the first ever Iron Fist. Back on the mortal world and up above, we also see that this mysterious entity that is now backing Danny, no longer the immortal dragon Xiao Lao, and instead someone completely new who I believe, in my opinion anyway, and I'll get to why in a second, is someone of the Egyptian pantheon, maybe even Khonshu, the Egyptian deity himself, yes, the one who famously empowers Moon Knight. But for now, this entity goes on to tell Danny that his time is dwindling and running out. He is supposed to fight with the new powers he has bestowed upon him. Do so and do so quick, because these creatures, now called Wraithlins, take all of them out, but do not forget our deal. Continuing on saying, deliver our common enemy's heart to me, so he will be rightfully judged for meddling with mortal affairs, with his punishment paid in full. So what I assume happened is Danny made this deal with this new deity or whoever is backing him to return to Earth or the land of the living, and in turn Danny has to use his new abilities to take out this person who is meddling with mortal affairs and what we'd assume to be the first Iron Fist and whatever evil he is trying to do. And even though Danny does have a limited supply of this power, he's still very powerful with them, as we see him taking on these creatures and abominations left and right. Everybody else still seeing normal civilians, but Danny is just trying his best to hurt them, but not, kill or maim them. Though that is a sort of downside, because he is on a time limit and rushing things, he isn't as cautious or careful as he's supposed to be, as a woman falls from a rooftop after exorcising whatever entity was possessing her, leading her to fall to her death. Or at least she would have if it wasn't for Daredevil Matt Murdock showing up and saving her, which is just another hero alerted to Danny's reckless new mission. But even still, this new entity goes on to ask Danny, what really fuels and motivates you, my fist of vengeance? Because the one you seek has unleashed 100 of his soldiers to stop you from delivering his reckoning. With that in and of itself calling him the Fist of Vengeance, just like how Khonshu will call Moon Knight his Fist of Khonshu, it's just little clues and hints like that points this to being someone of the Egyptian pantheon, maybe even Khonshu himself. But even as he continues and even starts to be overwhelmed by just the amount of bodies and civilians just being thrown at him, Ghost Fist, Danny right here, decides to stop holding back just a little bit to finally put to use some of this power and just obliterates everyone in his path, even using a move named the Rays of Ra, which once more points to the Egyptian pantheon. But all of this fighting is very public and very out in the open, drawing attention from not only more civilians, the authorities, but even other heroes, as Daredevil finally steps in and makes his appearance, throwing his billy club, which Danny Rand is eventually able to catch. Now, with him finally confronting Danny, he goes on to tell him that, look, even if these civilians are mind controlled or something's wrong with them, you just can't go fighting ordinary citizens as if they're superpowered criminals. Though immediately Daredevil thinks to his radar sense and knows something is not up, as Iron Fist's body, Danny Rand, there's no heartbeat or other telltale signs of a normal human being, almost like he is something more than that. But Danny just pays him no mind and continues to make his way towards Rand Tower and fight all of these possessed humans, though Daredevil in a moment tries to lunge for him to subdue him and figure out what is actually going on. But Danny at this point is just souped up on power, and Daredevil is almost like a non-threat to him, just completely phasing out of his lunge and attack and continuing on. And even as they come to blows, actual direct hand-to-hand combat, Daredevil is just dominated and overwhelmed by Ghost Fist and his not only fighting prowess, but his new abilities. But again, in a place like New York, where there's millions of people, especially in Times Square, this is just breeding ground for people to be possessed, and a whole entire army against Danny Rand here. So he keeps on fighting and hitting civilians, knocking them out and cleaning them from being possessed, until Daredevil finally steps in once more, having enough of whatever ring around the rosy is going on, and finally going to recognize this guy as being Danny Rand, the previous Iron Fist. He says, "Enough. I recognize your movements and I'm all too familiar with your style. You just can't keep going around like this, attacking civilians from his own perspective." This entire situation would be solved by just having a quick conversation, but time is of the essence. So instead of fighting Daredevil or trying to get him off his trail, he instead pushes one problem onto the other, going intangible once more, allowing the hordes of the possessed humans to now tackle and overwhelm Matt Murdock. Now, the comic goes on to say that, yeah, he will be fine and not just, beat to death, but it isn't actually shown what happens to him and how he gets out of being piled on by like dozens of people. Danny, on the other hand, from all his fighting and exertion and using his powers, is slowly but surely losing his juice, his allowed pool of power, and is getting weaker by the second, which just angers him that he won't be at full force to fight who he's truly after, someone named Quan, as we move over to the penthouse of Rand Enterprises in the giant skyscraper and see exactly that, the first Iron Fist in the person he is after, as he goes on to say, "Yes, Danny, I am here waiting. I don't care what new powers you possess or whose avatar you think you have become, but I, Quan Yaozu, will be your end." It being revealed that truly, yes, if the first Iron Fist in the entire book has been corrupted and not truly what it seems, and the true purpose of being an Iron Fist in the first place. So those are answers that we're going to get in the next time as this video and issue comes to a close. As always, this was AJ here at the Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.